A lot of the internet feels a lot like this nowadays. You open up your inbox, you're on 5 different social media platforms. Just about anywhere you go, there's a bunch of words being thrown at you. And we become very, very adept at avoiding it and trying to pick out just what we want and reading what we want. And even when we pick out when we want to read something, we probably only read just a part of it. We might go halfway, realize, nah, I'm actually not interested in this, and then move away from it. We might find something that we think is interesting and then skim it looking just for the keywords and then move on. Which means that as a writer, it's pretty challenging because you have to be able to be in a position where not only do you get in front of somebody, but you also have to be a writer that when somebody actually lands on what you have, you compel people to want to at least walk away with your key points. So how do you do that? We live in an era where we're constantly over-communicating and under-reaching. We can write thousands of words but not have an impact. We can write a few words and have a huge impact. We're surrounded by so much noise we can filter it out. So how do you make sure that what you write isn't part of that noise? When it comes to this presentation, this is really going to be about the way in which you write something rather than how you distribute it. Distribution is undoubtedly a huge part of how you actually get read, and it's also a huge part of that determines what style do you want to write in, for what audience, what is the intention of your writing. So this presentation is going to focus much more on universally applicable rules for creating engaging articles, engaging messages, engaging emails, engaging anything that you want people to enjoy reading and come back to you for. So I believe pretty much all of you know me, but it's always good for a presenter to just introduce themselves as well. So I'm Robert. I've been with Coming Out since 2018. And sort of my overarching thing is that I love creating awesome learning experiences, things that can really transform the way that people think and the way people feel. Professionally, I've also worked as a journalist for my university, for UCL, not UCLA, very different city, very different country. I certified as a life coach, broadly speaking, and I also founded my own public speaking company with my mother, Masters of Impact. So with the glamorous introduction out of the way, what are the objectives of this presentation? Well, the first is to help you become a better writer, to learn strategies that make the process of writing not only easier, but also more effective. It's to transfer skills. Whether you're writing for a uni, for Coming Out, or for a job app, this will help you everywhere. And I make this a very big point in this presentation that it is not just about, hey, if you're writing for Coming Out, do this stuff. This is stuff that if you are actually doing a course assignment, you could find this useful. When you're applying to other jobs, in the madness that is an application process, you'll find this useful because we could all use help with that. And then third, it's to gain a resource. So keep this presentation handy and you can use it as a reference later. I'll be uploading this to the intern resource folder so you can go through the slides and see all the stuff after this. So you don't have to watch the recording if you want to get the value again. So when it comes to being effective as a writer, to being engaging, the first thing is your message, which is what do you want to give to your reader? We write to communicate, so make it count. Consider, have you spent far too long sitting at a perfect 0 words or leering far too close to too many? You might be missing a clear message if you ever find yourself in the situation, and I know that I found myself on both sides of this fence. A clear message gives purpose to your writing and ensures you deliver value to your reader. And the best way to identify your message is to ask yourself, what is the #1 thing I want my reader to take away from this? And really make sure that it is just one thing, even if it has different parts to it. It's better to give less than to give too much. And I'll say 2 things here that are on the slides. One, if it seems a bit banal, have a clear message, that's because it is. But what we often find is that as we get wrapped up in doing just about anything, we start to forget about the really basic stuff. It's very, very easy to neglect to have a clear message. And you don't notice it as, I don't know what I'm talking about, but you notice it in, where am I going with this? You notice it in, how do I get started? These are the sorts of questions that begin to come up if you don't have a clear, specific approach to what you're writing. And when I write, it's better to give less than to give too much. I say this from experience. I've delivered plenty of trainings where I want to be as helpful as possible, give as many frameworks as possible, give as many models as possible. All the stuff that people can use, people leave saying, oh, wow, I learned so much. But they can't do anything with what they've learned because they've taken on too much. There's too many things to reflect on. When you limit the amount of information you give somebody, it's easier to just recall the number one takeaway, the biggest thing to remember. And it's easier for them to consider, what am I going to implement? Because I just take away one thing. Or what am I going to remember for the future? So I decided to take a look at my email inbox for this presentation and just look at some examples of clear messaging. So below, you're going to see some subject headlines and also the first line of that email. So I found a pretty basic one that I thought captured the key thought very well. And even if I don't open the message, it's clear. Don't you think Uber Eats is worth another try? We do. Here's £5 off your next 2 orders. Thank you, Uber Eats. I never pay full price from you because you keep giving me this stuff. What makes this effective is that it asks a question. When you ask a rhetorical question, people begin to think. In fact, you'll also notice that when I've marketed this particular webinar, the subtitle was how to write so people will read. And then I thought something feels a bit janky about that phrasing, but also it's just a statement. When I change it to, do people want to read what you write? You immediately start asking yourself, well, do they? Rhetorical questions are an effective way to get anybody thinking and get anybody wanting to stay a bit longer on what you said. And when it comes to the second line of this, it's unambiguous. The message is very clear. The message is, you will save money, use our service again. As opposed to Uber Eats. Uber Eats is a great place for getting food, and at the very bottom, here's a coupon. I wouldn't open that. So simple communication like this is effective because the key elements have been brought to the top. Then there's this guy that I'm subscribed to that he styles himself as an entrepreneurial coach. So I'm not going to read the whole paragraph, but the headline was, I wrote about this strategy on Entrepreneur Magazine. So immediately I'm wondering, what is this strategy? And immediately I'm thinking Entrepreneur Magazine. I don't know what it is, but it sounds credible. So 2 things are established by this communication. One thing is there's a sense of vagueness if you need to actually open the email to learn more. And there's a sense of credibility that says, this is relevant to me as an entrepreneur, and he's a resource that I can trust. And the third one is application deadlines, extended TEFL discount, new blog posts. So by this organization called Come On Out Japan. Very, very nice organization, recommended, nice people. Nice. I will say, compared to the above 2, the body text is a bit more vague. It goes on more pleasantries and is a bit less direct, but this is offset by the fact that they tell you everything you need to know below, and the headline is very specific. So you don't have to necessarily have a succinct introductory paragraph or a succinct headline for something like this, but just somewhere, just make sure that people at a glance know what this is about. And in here, I know that there's application deadlines, and if I'm waiting on them, that's all I need to read. If I'm apparently waiting on the TEFL discount, then I also know that's there. And if I want to read some more blog posts, those are also there. So clear message really just ends up being, tell people what you want to know and don't hide it, because sometimes we bury the important information. And this is not part of the presentation as a particular slide, but one thing that I thought about a lot is that the most painful part about writing a blog post, or about writing an email, or writing just about anything that you post online that you want people to discover, is that you can spend hours crafting the most effective body of text. You can write a small essay or a few paragraphs. It can be the best stuff you've ever written. If you give it a title that is uninteresting, nobody will read it. The title is extremely, extremely important because that is the thing that hooks people in. So having a message that is clear, relevant, and succinct that can be captured by a title is very, very key. So when it comes to breathing life in your messages, there are 3 points here. One is to be clear. Make sure the ideas are distinct, well explained, and not too many. Going for 3 to 5 is about the most that I would go for in any one piece of writing. One of my greatest pains when I started writing my own blog was that I just wanted to write one article on the process of forgiveness. So forgiveness is a pretty big idea in life coaching in some circles. So I wanted to write about just, why should we do it? What's a process you can use to kind of help yourself overcome anger? And so essentially, I wanted to write one article, and then I discovered, oh, actually, this would be better if I made it into at least 3. And then as I made 3, I realized, actually, this one would be better if it was 2 different articles. And then it kept spiraling out of control, and I had way too many articles. But that's because there's too many ideas. Making it into one article would mean that people were unlikely to read it, and there'd be too much stuff thrown at them. So there's great value in making sure that you've got distinct ideas, they're well explained, and there's just enough of them so that you don't overwhelm people and keep the focus very confined. The second is to be relevant. Target your message so that people will be drawn to it. So in the above examples, for instance, the target market of Uber Eats is people who want to order food from home, which there's a lot of people right now. I don't really like to order food from home. So as a result, I'm not really part of that target market. A lot of their messaging isn't very effective on me. But for quite a few people, very effective. For the second example of that entrepreneur, small business owners are his target market. So he speaks a language that appeals to them. And then the third one, people who want to teach, is the clear audience that come on out. So there's a lot of relevant writing to that target market. There's a particular saying in business, which is that if you try to help everybody, you will help no one. And this is the great idea behind needing to have a niche, not only as a business, but as a writer. Because people don't want to read an article that is good for everybody. They want to read an article that's good for them. People, if you're a student and you're struggling with exams, you want an article about, if you're a student, this stress relief technique will help you. If I'm a student who's stressed, I will see that trigger word of student and think that's me and I'm stressed and I'll go for it. If I just see, here's a stress relief that anybody can use, I might look at it and say, oh, it could be useful, but I'm busy studying right now. You have to be relevant. You have to be targeted. And then the third is to be valuable. Give something that people will appreciate and they'll want more of it. Consider that if you do any kind of, if you do any kind of writing and people don't take anything away from it, maybe they didn't learn anything, maybe they didn't find it funny, whatever you're trying to accomplish, they're going to be less inclined to come back to it in the future. You want to position yourself in whatever you do as somebody that people want to come back to. Writing is by no means an exception. If you have any questions, by the way, please type them in the chat as we go along, and I can keep monitoring that as we move, and I can address them as they come. So then the second point is their world. And the question here is, are you addressing what's valuable to them? Are you addressing what is valuable to your reader? Writing isn't about stuff. It's about people. Which again sounds like a very obvious remark until we consider that we actually get very wrapped up in the writing process. We get fixated. And we can't lose sight of the bigger picture. Because ultimately, anything we write is intended for an audience. Sometimes it's very easy to get focused on wanting to get all the thoughts you have on paper. But will that serve the people that you're trying to reach? These are the sort of questions you have to wonder. Whether it's an email or an essay or job application, it is going to someone. So speak to them directly and don't be afraid to personalize it to the people that you're trying to reach. If you can hit the criteria that matter most to the people that you're trying to reach, you're more likely to get the response that you want from them, whatever that response is. whether it's getting them just to like your post, getting them to invite you to a job interview, whether it's to give you a high grade, whatever it may be, you want to get a certain response out of them. So you need to elicit their criteria. And the best way to do this is to come up with an avatar, your ideal reader. Perhaps you've heard of an avatar, perhaps you haven't, perhaps you just think it's an anime. There's lots of things that avatar is. In the case of business, an avatar is simply an idealized customer. So the idealized customer that you look at and you say, this person, they could be based on a real person, they could be imaginary, they could be a coalescence of multiple traits of multiple people. But the idea is that you need to write for somebody. So sometimes it's best to imagine who you're writing for. So here are 3 examples. There's Albert, the student. As an avatar, Albert enjoys traveling, languages, and memes, but he's concerned about getting work experience, and he wants to teach. So if I'm writing for Albert as opposed to some other student who isn't particularly interested in teaching, but is really focused on studying, there are certain notes I need to hit on. So in a Come On Out article, I might be including a lot of humor, a lot of stories about my own traveling, and then end it on a call to action that is, you want to travel and you want to make an impact while you do it. Here's this internship. So if this is the type of person that I want to reach, I need to write with them in mind. Then a very practical example is just Alyssa, the teacher. Alyssa uses explicit criteria to award and detract points. Enjoys references to drama and theater. This is based on an actual teacher of mine. I used her name. And I include teachers for a very specific reason. We've all had to write for teachers in the past. Maybe we still have to do it now. Maybe we're graduated. But we all have this experience of having to follow a rubric and get scored on it. And it's a very good practice because everybody has a rubric in their head about what they want from you as they listen to you or as they read what you have to say. Teachers are just very explicit about it. So they're the easiest. If you can imagine a rubric in your head that people are marking you against and make sure that they give you the highest tick for all of that, you will always be in a good position. Which then lands into a very relevant third avatar, which is Alice, the recruiter. Alice has to sift through hundreds of applications. It's not fun. Alice scans for keywords to rapidly qualify or disqualify candidates because job applications suck to send them out. They suck even more to read. Because the fact of the matter is, when you send out a job application, you are competing against potentially hundreds of other people. It's not glamorous, but it is the reality. And when you've been on the actual recruiting side of the process, as I have, you discover that you aren't going to, you have a finite amount of time. And if you gave 5 or 10 minutes to every application, you'd never get through them. So the only way to be effective as a recruiter is to look at what is to say, these are the job specifications I want. I want them to have experience in these areas or talk about these things. And I'm going to quickly scan through multiple paragraphs of their writing. I'm going to get a feel for them. And if they don't match in this stuff, I'm writing them off. It's a very pragmatic way of doing things, which means that whenever I write for a job application, I make sure to use keywords. Because ultimately, that is one of the first things that any job recruiter is going to do. It's look at keywords. But then 2, it's to try and speak to the recruiter directly in a way that maybe somebody else wouldn't have. We almost feel as though there's a correct way to apply for a job, which tends to be very formal, very nice, the very traditional CV with the bloody serif font that looks Times New Roman 12. I don't have strong opinions about this. What are you talking about? The point is, if you make something that looks like anybody could have sent it, they're not looking for anybody. They're looking for somebody. So being aware of somebody's criteria in any situation is very valuable. And when you're trying to actually land a job, it's no different. I'll take more questions on that as well if you're interested. This is one of the many facets that writing comes down to. So when it comes to defining an avatar, it really comes down to asking the right questions. If you ask poor questions or no questions, you will get a very loosely defined character or none. When you ask increasingly relevant questions, you can actually begin to flesh out, who is this person that I'm writing for? What are they doing? What are they thinking? So 6 possible questions, and these are by no means exhaustive. 1, look at their desires. What are their goals and aspirations? Are they a student that wants to teach? Make sure you talk about those goals. Make sure you make them think, wow, yeah, that's what I want to do. This person knows what I like. Think about their pains. What keeps them up at night? What makes them concerned? Going back to the example of Albert, Albert, like many of us, is kind of concerned with just getting work experience and not wanting to be complacent. That's a very raw point to touch on, and you can be explicit in those things if you're convinced that this is the kind of person that you are trying to reach directly. There's also interests. What do they like? What do they dislike? What stories do you have that touch upon their interests, whether it's travel, whether it's games, whether it's sports, whatever it is, touch upon those interests, because it is very rewarding to read about somebody writing about stuff that you like. There's also duties. What are their responsibilities? What do they feel they have to do? Or what do they have to do to complete their degree, or to get a job promotion, or to live the life they want? Look at what they're responsible for, because people want to act on their responsibilities. And the location, where do they hang out? What websites do they go to? If you're publishing something on Facebook, that's very different to publishing an article on Twitter. It's very different to writing something long form via email. It's very, very different to direct messaging somebody on LinkedIn. Get a sense of where they go and consider, what does it take to customize your writing style to the expectations of that platform. And then 6th is mindset. What information are they looking to get? There's great value in establishing expectations and fulfilling on them. There's great value in making sure that people get what they want to get from you. Because there's nothing more frustrating than walking into a presentation or starting to read an article and then just discovering that you just wasted your time because they didn't give you what you wanted from them. Either because they promised and they didn't deliver, or because they just didn't tell you what they were going to talk about. You had a different idea, and as a result, you were just on 2 completely different pages. Making sure that you have the same mindset as the reader, or making sure that you give the reader the mindset you want them to have, means that they'll get the most value out of what you have to say. The third part, and this is one that's often neglected when it comes to being an engaging writer, is the outcome. And the question here is simple. Have you given them a next step to take? When somebody finishes reading what you've written, what are they going to do now? Because reading is nice, but you want action. You want something to result from what you do. Think about how many times have you read an email and thought, all right, that's nice, and just moved on. Probably didn't even come back to it. How many times have you read an appeal on social media or in your inbox, perhaps even just something like change.org, and you didn't actually sign a petition or share it or actually do anything with it? You read it, maybe you skimmed it, maybe you actually read it deeply, you just didn't do anything with it. And how many times have you asked a bunch of questions in a message, like just an email to one person, and got an answer to one of them or none of them? We've all been here in all these different instances, whether we're the person who's responding this way or getting this response. Because everybody is always busy, and the chances are, even if you hook people with what you've written, they'll end up moving on and not moving back. So how do you change that? You have to consider, what do you want them to do? So for example, do you want them to reply to your message? Ask a clear, specific question that makes replying now feel quick and easy. Don't make it hard. We've all been in a position where we've waited literally a week for somebody to answer what seems like a basic question. But then if you actually read your email, there's nothing basic about it at all. You're asking something very nuanced and people think, ah, that's nuanced. Well, I'm busy. Well, I'll get to that later. So you get put on the back burner. Or we've all been in the terrible position where we received an email. We said, oh, okay, I'll respond later. And then a day passes, and then another day passes, and a week passes, and all of a sudden you feel a bit awkward about replying. So you just don't, so then a month passes and you think like, oh God, I don't know what to do anymore. And then maybe if you're lucky, this person sends you another email. You can say, oh yeah, I'm sorry I didn't say anything. Anyway, yeah, I'd like to go out to the park someday next week. It's a ludicrously relatable situation, but it's because we put things on the back burner. So making sure that you ask questions that are clear and specific to give people one very easy course of action means that you'll get a higher response. Maybe it's to go to a page. Maybe it's just to give you a piece of information. Whatever it is, make that question specific. The second could be to set up a call. This is especially relevant if you're trying to perhaps land a job very directly, or if you're trying to do marketing on behalf of Coming Out or some other company. Tell them what the call will be about, how long it'll be, and offer specific times or a calendar link. The worst thing you can do if you're trying to speak to somebody one-to-one is to say, hey, can we have a call? Without establishing what the call will be about, without establishing if you want 5 minutes or 50, and just saying, oh, I can do any time. What about you? And they say, oh, I can do any time as well. Even if you're very, very flexible with your schedule, you need to be specific. You need to give them just a range so that they can begin to think, hey, can I do those? And when you make this sort of information easy, you're more likely to get the response you want. You're more likely to get people saying, I can do this time. And sure, I'd be happy to talk about this thing you want to talk about because you made it clear. Especially if it's a person that they don't know you particularly well. There's always a sense of danger that they might waste their time, they might give more than they intend to. Giving them these criteria creates a safe sense of, I can respond and it'll be fine. And then the third potential thing, it could be to click a link and to go to your website. So for that, you just have to consider, what can you offer? And offer a reward for them going there. In many emails, you will give the gist of the value, or you will propose the big problem that you want to solve, and you will sell people on the problem. And then on the website, you will offer a solution, or you'll offer more value that will actually allow them to take what you've already said and put it to use. And this actually was one part that is not in this presentation, but I will bring up right now because it's extremely, extremely important. If you are trying to write about a solution, you're trying to write about something that is useful, that you maybe think is something that is very helpful, the biggest mistake you can do is write about your solution. Because by nature, we don't think about solutions. We think about problems. We don't walk around every day saying, oh man, I really wish I could start meditating. And well, maybe some people do. But I really wish I could start meditating and start eating better and start doing all this stuff that I'm not doing. Those can be there, but generally the first thoughts are, oh, I feel so exhausted. I feel so stressed. I feel like I'm just eating bad stuff. I wish I wasn't doing all this stuff. Or even an even simpler example, people who smoke, they say, oh, I want to not smoke. They don't say, I'm looking for the accredited five-step process to inhibiting nicotine ingestion and becoming more healthy. They say, I just don't want to smoke. People are inherently focused on their problems. So focus on their problems. And part of that in writing often means you actually have to sell people on their problem. You actually have to remind them, you have this problem and you don't like it. Don't you want to have it? Don't you want to not have it? And then once they start saying yes to that, then you bring in your solution. And when you do, you have to talk about the benefit it'll be to them, the things that they will get out of it, the things they'll get out of you speaking to them, or them considering your job application, or them buying your product or service, rather than just, here are the features that are a part of this. You know, it's, for example, this presentation, I could market this very presentation, I could market it as, I'm going to give you a series of slides. There's about 27. In them, I will cover 3 points for how to write better. And I hope you enjoy it. What I just said isn't wrong, but it's not engaging. If I say, come to this professional development seminar and you'll discover how to make it so that people want to read what you write, so that you'll never find that the stuff you write is ignored. It's the same presentation, but it sounds a lot more useful now. Write on the benefits, not the features. Focus on the problems that people have, not the solutions. Often it just means looking at them from a different angle. But what a lot of amateur copywriters do often in business is that they just write about the things that they think are good and the specific points that make them good, and ignore all the stuff people actually want to know. So no matter what it is, always remember a call to action. I'm going to give you 2 more practical tips and tricks, some additional strategies that you might be able to use that'll help you out when you're trying to be effective as a writer. And the first thing I want to start with is this. You won't believe how much this will help you. This is the one thing that when you use it responsibly, you'll find that people are going to be asking, what is he talking about? And why do I want to know? So what is this? This is incompletion, which is a very not commonly talked about, but incredibly ubiquitous concept in writing, especially when you're trying to hook people on the internet. So what is incompletion and why is it very, very important? Well, imagine these examples as being titles to an email or a post, and it'll demonstrate the difference. When you hear about this strategy will change everything, you immediately ask, what strategy? Do I know what it is? And you might go ahead and click on it. Or if you read, you won't believe he said that, you might say, okay, who said it? Who said what? What is so unbelievable about this? Why wouldn't I believe that? And if your curiosity gets the better of you, you will open that message or you'll click the link to find out. Contrast this with the SMART goals strategy or a Canadian said sorry. Both of these titles have just given away everything. If you have a feeling of, I already know the SMART goal strategy, I don't need the strategy, or you read a Canadian said sorry, it's like, great, tell me something I don't know. And you won't read and you won't click those articles because you've just been given the full picture. The statement's been posed as an idea and there's a closed loop. There's no reason to engage any further. The idea behind incompletion is very much like giving people an appetizer so that they want the full meal. If you give people a full meal too efficiently, they're not going to need you. That especially goes also for selling. If you give people too much of a sense of what your solution is, people will think, I can do the solution myself. And they'll go home, they'll say like, thanks for pointing out that I could use a solution. Well, I don't need you anymore. I can do this myself. And then they won't buy from you or they won't want to listen to you anymore. So that's very situational. You might not be selling something, but you have to consider the cost of giving people a bit too much when you actually want them to stick around a bit longer. And this really comes down to the idea of disqualification. Don't get disqualified without getting read. In titles, you want to use incompletion to beat disqualification. And what disqualifies you in the eyes of the reader could be, this isn't relevant to me, or I already know that. What you want people to think is, this could be relevant to me, and maybe I don't know this yet. So how will people know? They'll know when they open your email, tap read more, or open your message. Give people just enough that they want to read what you've written. And then make sure you deliver there. And what I will say here, you might be asking yourself, some of those headlines sound a lot like clickbait articles, don't they? And you know what? You're absolutely right. And that's kind of the painful point about the internet. One, you need ways to attract people's attention. And if you just write very simple titles like you might be driven to do, we will not get a response. And two, a lot of them suck, but they're kind of effective. Because until you actually become present to the fact that they are using this very simple principle against you, you're more likely to fall for it. So if anything, you don't have to use this, but simply knowing about it means that you won't fall victim to it as much as you might have before. That being said, do use it responsibly. Give people a reason to engage with you. And think about the whole message. Now let's think about the whole of the message itself rather than just the title. If you're trying to get people to send you a message, set up a call, or download a resource, they need to be curious to find out more. And if you leave people feeling like they've got the whole picture and they've made their decision, you're not going to get that response. What I always think about is I want to help the person who's reading. I want to make a positive impact. And unless I use strategies that will have them stick around, I won't make that happen. That is the ethical way to use things like this. And a common mistake in sales then, as I said before, if you give people too much of something, they'll think they got the solution and they'll walk away. And now, for literally the opposite. How do you give people the big picture? And I'm going to illustrate this with something I wrote to a client 4 years ago. I stumbled across this completely accidentally in my emails. But it's a pretty useful thing, which was originally designed for setting up a call with somebody, but it could be used just about anywhere because the 3 concepts here are basically universally applicable. So here are the 3 P's of preemptive questions. Essentially, when you are speaking to somebody, they're really going to have a bunch of questions in their head. People are going to, if you call somebody or if you email them for the first time, you're a cold email, you're a cold contact, they're going to be asking several questions in their head. The first question will often be, why are you contacting me? So answer that question in your introduction. So for my client, he wanted to contact schools to sell them a framework to help students. So what I recommended to him is that he could begin his calls when he contacts schools with, hi, I'm Billy, and I'm contacting you to talk about how to keep students from dropping out of classes and keeping them going strong throughout the year. Again, this is benefit-focused language. It's focused on the problem of schools, not on, hi, I'm Billy, can I talk to you about this product I developed? So why are you contacting me? If you put this in an email or at the beginning of a call, people immediately know like, oh, okay, that's clear. I understand. But there's a second question, which is, what are you going to do? How long are we going to be here for? You know, I'm busy. What am I, you know, what's the picture here? So you could just simply say, as Billy did, I'd like to ask you 3 questions about your student enrollment situation, if that's all right. And then immediately it's, oh, okay, I know what's coming now. I guess I can answer these questions, or I guess I can keep reading this email and I can respond. It's just a few simple questions. And then the third preemptive question is, what's the point? What are we doing? What's the end goal? What do you want out of this interaction? You're contacting me. What do you want from me? So what Billy said then is, if you like what you hear and it sounds like a good fit, I'd like to organize a meeting with you to discuss my student talent fulfillment tool, Ladder of Achievement. So this was a very specific way of setting goals for students so that they could learn better, so that they could kind of take responsibility for their own learning. Billy, as a client of mine, he was middle-aged man, had 2 daughters, and he'd struggled a lot in school, and he didn't want his daughters to do the same. So he created the system to do that. That's the backstory behind Ladder of Achievement and this process. So these are 3 questions that you will often have people asking. You've probably thought them before, even if you didn't vocalize them. Why are you contacting me? What are you going to do? And what's the point? What's the end goal? If you can write these things at the beginning of a lengthy message that you want a personal one-to-one response to, or if you are calling somebody and you can address these concerns, people will be much more amicable and they'll be much more willing to lend you their attention. So always preempt the question in your reader's head and answer them first. And those were just 3 questions. But sometimes I literally will use rhetorical questions in my writing just because people might ask them if I were speaking to somebody one-to-one, would they ask me this question? If the answer is yes, I will put that question wholesale in what I'm writing so that when people come across it, they say like, oh yeah, I was thinking that. And then you give them an answer. It's very easy to structure writing when you're asking questions. And sometimes asking yourself the right series of questions will help you flesh out something and have it come out very naturally and very conversational. In summary then, what can you do to be an engaging writer? How will you be an engaging writer? The first thing is about your message. Say something meaningful. Be clear, be relevant, and deliver value. The second point is to focus on their world. Figure out what matters most to your reader, then laser focus in on it. And the third is the outcome. Writing is only as good as the effect it has, so include a call to action. So take 5 minutes and just write down in a document on a piece of paper, how will you use what you've learned today to be a more engaging writer? It could be with Come On Out. It could be in university assignments. It could be in applying to jobs. How will you use what you've learned in this presentation? So take just half a minute longer to finish up, so we have some time for live questions. And again, feel free to comment questions as well. Well, on that note, do keep reflecting. Do keep thinking about how you can apply the content of the presentation to make a better writer. I'll make the slides available later. And on that note, thank you for attending the live session. It's very appreciated. Please enjoy this freakish picture of two kids that I found. It's royalty free. Hope you get some feeling out of it. That sounds incredibly wrong. All I know is that I keep staring at this and I don't know why. But please ask any questions. Thank you. And that is my email, my Discord, and my website. Please feel free to message me.
Thank you, Robert. And if anyone has any questions, yeah, I wanted to say, really, really interesting. And I tried not to read it too much before this because I wanted to have a fresh take as someone who's been writing for years. And what I liked is like, I could totally immediately, I haven't thought about these concepts formally before, and I can immediately use them in just an email to you guys, just an email to interns or any, you know, sending out, which I reviewed some of my past emails and I missed either purpose, process, or payoff in each of them. I missed one of them in each. Or newsletters, if me and the writing team's working on the newsletter. But even like my outdoor writing, as you guys know, that I do, it applies to it so well. And even the incompletion factor of when we're sending out our coming out newsletter, but also my hiking articles. I love that just applies across the board. So if you guys get emails from me, I'll probably be using these concepts. But I think that was a cool little thing I did briefly. I was trying to pay attention, not get too into it, but I looked through my past emails of each of my accounts and it was kind of comparing on the notes I took from Robert's presentation. It was kind of cool to see where I did well and where I missed it. So I don't know, that was just a fun little thing I just did and thought it was interesting if anyone tries it out. It's
really worth reviewing some of your old writing, especially when you have a different way to look at it. Yeah. Because you also discover that you have a lot of inherent biases in the way that you write. Not necessarily bad biases, just a certain way in which you like to focus on stuff. And getting clear on that allows you to actually ask yourself, is the way I'm writing helpful? Am I accomplishing what I want to do with this writing? Whether that accomplishment is as simple as I would like people to like this post, or it is as simple as, please give me a job. Why are you not reading this article? I spent a lot of time writing this cover letter. What's wrong with it? It turned out mine were way too long. That's what I discovered. And I was missing a lot of the clarity and the succinctness that was needed in a letter like that. So that's just a personal example.
Question.
Yeah.
What happens, Robert, when so many people start to use the clickbait version of incompletion such that we actually start to tune it out, even if maybe it's worth reading?
It's a good point, because that's immediately actually why I had to preface, because I don't use the word clickbait in presentation, but I had to bring in clickbait just to clarify it, because I actually sent this presentation to a friend. And the first thing they said to me was, oh, I found the clickbait section. It's like, that's not the point. But yeah, what do you do when people tune out clickbait? And what I'd say is that you have to use, it's really about the way in which you execute it and the way in which you frame it with value. Because often a lot of clickbait is used with deliberately exploitative imagery, and the concept that they try to build off of most is outrage, or kind of a curiosity, like, oh, I shouldn't be curious, but you know, what did happen when that wolf went out into it was released back into the wild? Like that, I think that was one video that I saw was like, these wolves got reintroduced to the wild in this park. What happens next will astound you. What happened next? They trotted outside and ran into the woods. There's nothing impressive there. There is no, if it sounds like I'm not giving a direct answer, that's because there is no concise answer. It really comes down to using your judgment and understanding your audience. You have, by all means, stay away from things that if it seems too much like clickbait to you, it probably is, even if you're not trying for it. But you can use incompletion in a way that, for example, one of the things that I learned very well how to do from one of the people I trained with is to create models. Models, just simple acronyms or shapes that have different bits of information embedded in them. What makes models great is two things. One, it means that you can actually create intellectual property that you can then say, I'm the expert of this, I created this model. But then two, it also means that you can show people this 5-point plan, and then they say, oh, I want to know what the 5 points are. And then you say, well, you have to sign up to this newsletter. And people won't say, oh, that's clickbait. They'll say like, oh, okay, I have to sign up to the newsletter. Incompletion is a concept that goes beyond clickbait. It just happens to be used most in a title, because the title is where you need to attract people's attention. But it can be used anywhere when you want to inspire a natural curiosity in the reader and to continuously pull them forward.
I'm just going to start reading into all the emails. I get the subject line so much now.
It took me way too long to find 3 emails I was happy with for that area, because I wanted
the newsletter.
When I saw it coming out there, I was like, yeah, I'm doing that.
You know what, the incompletion, which I loved how you prefaced it, because I was getting real excited to find out what that was. And I'd never heard that term, actually. I honestly had never heard that. And I guess I'd thought about the concept like casually, but never, you know, in that detail. It kind of reminds me of the problems with movie trailers nowadays. They're more and more becoming just giving you the whole story. And I'm like, yeah, I'm done. I've got that. I don't know if anyone else notices that. And
yeah,
which is kind of the opposite trend. I'm like, why are they, what's the reason for this? So, yeah.
It's like, who's the killer? Oh, it's him. Thank you. I can save an hour and a half now.
Yeah. So anyway, I just thought that was interesting.
I have a question, Robert.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really like the pictures you used in the presentation. What was your motivation behind those?
So the motivation behind the pictures, it adds basically, for me, what a picture should always do is that it should not be a focal point per se, or at least that's not the intention of putting it in there. The intention of putting it there is to carry a certain imagery and to accommodate the other points that are there. So essentially, if you look through a presentation and you see a good mixture of images and words, you'll think like, oh, this is a very readable presentation. I can look through this, and it spaces things out. It makes things come to life a bit more. Whereas if all I did was just add text, it would feel a lot more dense. And it would kind of feel like it's just one continuous text scroll. When it comes to particular images that I use, there's 2 criteria that I generally go by. One is make sure that it's royalty free, so you can use it anywhere. There's a lot of really good websites you can find high quality royalty free stuff. I use Pixabay very often. So that's pixabay.com. And then there's also Unsplash. So there's a lot of really great places where you can just get free pictures. For personal use, everything works. For commercial, you really have to check permission sometimes. But a good picture, which is my second criteria, is does it capture the metaphor or the energy of what I'm talking about? Then I include it. So for example, I tried to be deliberately fun and playful with some of these pictures. The last one was just with the kids was just kind of high excitement and energy to end the presentation on. Earlier on, I had a picture of a woman in front of a vending machine trying to decide what drink she's going to get. That's like, what action do you want them to take? They're always tangentially related, but the point is always to create that sense of pop, that thing that draws your attention in. And then once you're drawn in by the pretty picture, then you can read the stuff that's next to it.
It works. I really liked the vending machine one. That was my favorite. I was like, wow, nice selection on that picture. The dog, I don't know what it was related to preemptive question, but I was like, yep, I'm in.
Exactly. I wasn't sure either, but I just felt like, I don't know, this belongs here. It almost felt like the dog was kind of looking at you just like, why are you here? Why aren't you petting me? I'm like, okay, don't pet your clients, but you know, do answer like, why are you here? Do answer the inquisition.
Well, I guess when you have a dog and your purpose is to go pet them, and the process of petting, and what's the payoff after the dog sits and gets pets, they get a treat maybe, you know?
We have to be very pragmatic about how we pet the dogs, you know, it's a lot of strategy actually. Thanks for coming. Person who's leaving. I have to say this verbally for the recording so that people are like, what's he saying thanks to?
All right. Anything else, since I think we're about to start a social hangout in the Discord for those that are interested. And
Thanks,
I'm
Robert.
also
That was,
gonna,
really
oh, go
interesting.
ahead, Zane, sorry.
Yeah, just want to say thanks, Robert.
Great. Well, this recording will be uploaded to the interim resource folder, and we'll also be putting future presentations in there as well. And soon enough, you'll hear about what the next presentation is going to be. I have to take a look at the poll that was taken in the intern orientation, but the next training will be in 2 weeks. So look forward to that then.
Yeah,
Thanks,
thanks.
Robert. Great job.
Thank you.
And I'll send an email out with, as Robert just said, with the folder and where we'll put this in this presentation. And then since Robert talked about avatars, which was really cool and relevant, Gwen also has a full, I think, hour on personas on the website, which I put in there for further learning. All right. Cool. Thanks again, Robert. I'll stop the recording. Bye, everyone watching the recording.